Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel called Biblical Validity. And this is where I look at how science, historical scholarship, and logic all point to make a very strong case that the Bible is quite reliable, quite valid. And so let's, this is the middle of I think this could be a six-part series. This is part two. So anyway, the series is basically, is there a scientific basis for an almighty personal God? And of course, I'm going to make that case. All right. Now, this is part two, and I broke this part actually into two parts. Physics and astronomy give strong evidence for the supernatural. Part three will be about some other fields of study, such as neuroscience, near-death experiences, and believe it or not, UFOs. Point to the supernatural. Yeah, I can make a good case on that. Okay, so let's get into this. Oh, don't worry if you kind of turned off the idea about me, a YouTube guy with a microphone in his face talking about science. Um, I'll do my best to make this understandable. I have experience at this. I'm a mathematician. I taught math to college level adults for 36 years, and so I've had a lot of practice explaining something complicated in the simplest ways I could figure out. So you'll have to see. Okay, give me a chance. Now then, um, so otherwise, this video and the next one explains the science in more detail when it comes to establishing the supernatural. All right, so we have to start there, and but the video series takes a deep dive into the evidence supporting a personal Almighty God. I'm kind of repeating myself a little bit. Those who do believe in God don't need all this to be convinced, do you? But my point is that science points to God, not away from God. And um, and I want to give you the information. If you are a believer, I want to give you the information that really supports all this. It's not just a matter of faith. God provides evidence. Okay, faith is wonderful. Faith in God, yes, but God leaves plenty of evidence for His existence, and that's what we're uncovering some in these video series. Okay, so the mainstream science of scientific naturalism, sometimes it's called scientific materialism. I'm not sure if there's a difference there. Um, this is really what has been governing science for the past 200 years, for the most part. And they just throw a barrage of information built on a foundation that undermines faith and undermines confidence in the reliability of the Bible. And wait till you see how thin that foundation is. We'll point that out as we go through stuff on my web channel here. But when you examine the body of evidence, science strongly really does support the Bible. So I want you to see this. And now, if you're a skeptic, you're not sure you believe this. Well, I hope you'll take this evidence into account. If you do believe in God and all that stuff, and do believe in the Old Testament, it's totally valid. I just want to give you some good ammunition, okay, that you can use to help explain this to other people whenever the time arises. Okay. Now, when you remove the godless worldview of naturalism or materialism and just look at the evidence, it tends to fit into the biblical view. All right, and that's what you'll see. Um, so I'm going to go into the fundamental weaknesses of scientific naturalism in a future video. And I had some insight came to me in the middle of the night on this also, which is going to help. Anyway, our approach here is to look at scientific evidence and see if it lines up with the biblical view. All right. Amazingly, we don't need to try to prove biblical validity. We just look at the evidence. It seems to take care of itself. Okay, that's part of the insight I got in the middle of the night, which I thought was amazing. And I'm going to elaborate on that in a future video. Okay. But thus, science actually strengthens our faith. It does not undermine it. You see, science is not the enemy of Christianity at all. It is the friend of Christianity. How people use science in the professional, I call the mainstream scientific world, does try to undermine the Bible. It undermines our faith, and that's why I'm here. Okay, so to do my little part to deal with that. All right. So, getting into this really topic here, in order for any supernatural being to exist, including God, we must first look at whether there could be a supernatural realm. Okay, now, uh, there's no evidence that I know of that, God exists in the physical universe. You just can't walk up to God and talk to him like that in the physical world. He just doesn't live here. Now, he really did for a while when Jesus came down. Jesus is God, and he gave humanity a chance to see himself, to see God, and talk to him, get to know him, and that's pretty amazing. That was an amazing 2-year ministry of Jesus. Well, anyway, we have a lot to look at there later on. All right, but yeah, what evidence do we have of the supernatural? And the we cannot detect the supernatural with physical instruments. Okay, we can't use science to detect supernatural, but believe it or not, science points to the supernatural. All right, so scientific materialism or scientific naturalism, it's a belief or faith that there's only a physical universe and that the laws of nature totally explain everything through natural processes. Okay, so like for example, in evolution, they talk about natural selection. That's a mechanism, they believe, where nature somehow chooses to cause mutations that will favor the animal or organism, and everything is done through natural processes. Um, I see this, some people who, there's a, I don't know, maybe a middle-aged British scientist who's a very good physicist, and I see him a lot on YouTube. I like listening to him. And he he had the most beautiful video the other day talking about how beautiful this universe is, how wonderful it is, how all the laws of nature just fit together. And what was missing was that people like him are worshiping nature. They're not worshiping God. They're not worshiping the one who created the nature, created all this universe, and that's a problem from a Christian standpoint. Okay, now then, now these beliefs of the materialists or the naturalists, it conveniently eliminates the need for God. All right, and it actually started in a big way in geology in the 1790s, and I'm going to do a short video series on the history of all that, how science got so off track, and why there are weaknesses in the mainstream science. Anyway, we'll save that for another series. All right. In fact, we shall see that known science gives very strong evidence contradicting the belief that there's only a physical universe and thus no supernatural existence. Okay. Um, Nevertheless, okay, proof that the supernatural must exist just is not possible to the satisfaction of everyone. All right. When we accept something really hard, we almost consider it proved. I can't prove this to everybody's satisfaction. No one can, because people get hardened worldviews. And if you're convinced there is no God or no personal God or something else, that God created this 13.8 billion years ago and just sat back and watched it all develop, um, it's unless you're willing to open your mind to evidence, it's just not going to help a whole lot for you. Okay. And I'm sorry to hear that, actually. So a person's hardened worldview is not always shaken by contrary evidence. Okay, now mine was, and because after a while, it just seemed like the stuff I believed in was kind of empty, and I asked God, to point the way, and someday I'll talk about that experience. But anyway, all right. So many aspects of testing biblical validity concern questions with only two opposing possible outcomes, and this is one of them. So this is a very important point I want to make here. How do we test the evidence um, when you're looking at the biblical worldview or the materialistic worldview or some other kind of worldview that excludes God? How do you test scientific evidence? How do you test that, or even historical evidence? And so this, I think, is kind of a major insight I had, was given, I believe, from above. Okay, judge for yourself. And I talked about it in an earlier series on personal worldviews and the limits of knowledge. And actually, you can kind of look at a parable of Jesus, kind of points to how we can deal with this. All right, so back to the problem here. Question: is the sum of all existence entirely physical? In other words, is it natural? Or is there also a supernatural existence outside of the physical? All right, so you look at that sentence, and here's where the logic part comes in. Those two statements are mutually exclusive. One's going to be true, one of them's going to be false. You know, there's no in between on this, is there? We either have a supernatural or we don't. Okay, well that's good. So one side, to emphasize this, one side is true, the other is false. Both are theories in a general sense and cannot be proven to everyone's satisfaction. All right, kind of made that point a minute ago. So we examine the evidence to see which is most likely. Okay, let's see how the evidence looks. And all right, so evidence collected will tend to contradict the false side of the question, requiring continual revisions to the theories supporting the false side. Now, in fairness, this is kind of normal often in science. Scientists get a theory and then they start trying to do some experiments, and sometimes it doesn't work out and they have to revise their theories. Okay, this is kind of par for the course a lot in science. And I don't criticize it from that at all. But here's a question where if you're on the false side of this question, no matter what you do, you're going to keep running into contradictions. You're going to have to keep revising your theories. Okay. On the other hand, evidence collected will also tend to support, not contradict, theories on the true side of the question. All right. So if you're working on the true side, it doesn't mean you're not going to make mistakes. You can make mistakes, and with your theories and your mistakes in how you evaluate the science. But by and large, a good science will tend to support, not contradict, theories on the true side of such a question. All right, so the focus in this video will center on the well-established first and second laws of thermodynamics. Okay, don't get turned off by that. I can explain these. Plus astronomical observations beginning in the 1920s. All right, so here we go. We will look at strong statistical evidence in other fields of study in the next video, part 3. That would be neuroscience, and I think I mentioned that earlier. All right, I just didn't want to jam it all into this video because this one's probably going to be long enough. And I know you're, by the way, I'm quite aware your time's valuable, so I try to make these videos as short but yet as comprehensive as I can. And that's an interesting balancing act. Okay. All right, so the primary focus, okay, the question at the top of the page here. Is the universe eternal with no beginning? Now, this is the key question. Do we have an eternal universe that never had a beginning? Okay, well, so the primary focus concerning any supernatural existence actually revolves around that question. All right, let's see how that works. And so it's a key question for which physics and astronomy offer important evidence. All right. So a universe, here's the issue. A universe without a beginning implies that it simply always existed, infinitely far into the past. It would not have required a supernatural being to create it. You look at a lot of the belief systems before Christianity, the ancient Romans, the ancient Greeks, they had their mythologies. Hindus were, I think, probably around much longer. They have their theories. I now hope I'm right on this. In Hinduism, Brahma is the top dog, man. He's the top god. But I don't think it says he created the universe. Okay, he's just somehow here he is, and he's the most powerful god. Well, the Greeks and the Romans, they had Zeus or Jupiter. Those were the most powerful gods, and but none of them created the universe. And you can go through a lot through history that way. And so you see a lot of that. Actually, almost all world religions do not have a creator god. Okay, they don't have a fundamental creator god. Buddhism, I'm still trying to come to grips with Buddhism. They love the teachings of Buddha, and he has some nice things to say. I'll grant that. I don't think, when it came down to it, I don't think Buddha that I know of really talked about God. And so he had no ideas or conclusions there. And there are other world religions, Taoism, Shinto, and stuff I'm not too familiar with, Confucianism. All right. Now, science entered the modern era when it embraced the scientific method, testing theories through observations and repeatable experimentation. All right. So now this was Galileo was a pioneer in this. A few others, I'm sure, around his time. And someday I may talk about this history part a little more. A little fun fact about Galileo: his father was part of a group of composers who created operas in Italy. So, and I like operas, so way to go. And probably a good chance Galileo knew a lot about music theory. Okay, but I digress. In the beginning of this new era, most scientists in the Christian world believe the Genesis account of creation. Now, this is in the Christian world. And now these scientists include some real giants of their day. Johannes Kepler, he was the last great astronomer who did most of his work without telescopes because they hadn't been invented yet. Galileo did not invent the telescope, but he was the first one to try to make a bunch of them and sell them. And he was an outstanding scientist. Sir Isaac Newton, wow, he was awesome. And then James Clerk Maxwell, it might not have heard of him. He he's from the 1800s. In 1860, he discovered that magnetism and electricity are basically the same. You know, you can go from one to the other. And electromagnetic theory has really revolutionized our understanding of how to use electricity and things like that. So anyway, I won't get into that. But Maxwell was, as far as I know, was a Christian that way. Okay. Um, as Oxford mathematician, I like this guy, John Lennox. As he puts it, if they were interested, these towering guys of science, they're interested in figuring out how God did it. And by the way, if you Google John Lennox on YouTube, you'll see lots of videos with him. He's a retired mathematician. He's coincidentally his area, especially mathematics, is the one that interested me the most. It's a field of abstract algebra. But there's one video he did, 7 days that divided the world. He's talking about the creation account in Genesis. That's an excellent video, but he's got tons of great videos and a very interesting fellow. He's Irish, by the way. Okay. By the late 1700s, mainstream science had begun embracing a physical universe shaped entirely by natural forces. God was not required in their worldview. So, like I say, I'm gonna do a video or two on this part. You know, this history of how this materialism got a hold on our world. We'll do that later. In their worldview, it is okay to believe in God, but God may have had no role in the evolution of the universe and life. And the Genesis account of creation was a myth. Okay, so um, you know they weren't too mad at you if you still believed in God, but oh, that's fine. Well, those people are nice people. They believe in morality and so forth. But really, if you want to do serious science, you can't bring God into it. All right, we're going to look at nature and how it works. That's basically was their point of view. And that grew significantly in the 1800s with Darwin's evolution, with Charles Lyell, who was a friend of Darwin, wrote an influential book on geology, and as many others that follow from there. I would say that by roughly 1900, the scientific world was almost all in. And if you wanted to make a living, professional living in the sciences, um, in that world, don't bring in God. All right, you can only talk about science, and that's true today. You know, if you're a professional scientist in the secular world, they're not going to print your research if you mention anything to do with God. Okay, so you kind of shut out of that field there. All right, now the second law of thermodynamics. Okay, don't worry, there's no quiz at the end of this video. Second law of thermodynamics was initially formulated in 1824 by Sadi Carnot, or is it Sadi Carnot? I'm not sure. From observations that heat energy always flows from warmer bodies to cooler bodies in all spontaneous situations. What's this got to do with God? It was a start. And Carnot was, I think, he was an engineer. Can't remember if he was British or Belgian or French, maybe French or Belgian. Anyway, he was, for example, steam engines. You burn wood or coal, creates a lot of heat, boils water, and that steam is used to power the mechanisms that cause wheels to spin. and work to be done. So he was interested in how do we use heat to create that energy, and he pretty much discovered this principle. And this principle is one of the most reliably established principles of science, and I'm talking about the second law of thermodynamics in total. And it is one of the most reliable ones out there. I think the only ones that ignore it may be evolutionary biologists. So, okay. Um, anyway, by 1860, the second law of thermodynamics was established in completed form. All right, so now it gets a little more involved. And in simple terms, it also means that everything just eventually wears out or decays without external intervention. Everything wears out. And my personal view is that God instituted this after the fall of man in the Garden of Eden when Adam and Eve committed the most colossal mistake in history, and God sort of cursed the world, and I think he brought in the second law of thermodynamics. All right, I don't have any proof for that. It's just my theory. All right, but everything wears out in time, and out more accurately, here we go, a little bit of terminology. Entropy increases and information decreases in a closed system. In case you'd like to look all this up in order to understand this more deeply. Okay, it's I think it takes a while to kind of get. It took me a while to sort of sort this out. Entropy is, in a simple sense, sort of a measure of disorder. It says that everything, as entropy increases, things turn into disorder. And information is something that would decrease the disorder in a system. So in my household, I am entropy. My wife is information. And so I just create little messes here and there, and she's constantly, coming around and fixing the house, and she does a beautiful job in the house, makes it look wonderful. I'm videoing this in my cabin, by the way, and she did a great job decorating it. And I come down here, and you have to sweep the floor, And, so I'm entropy, she's information. Okay, that's kind of a simple way of looking at it. It gets a little deeper than that, if you're interested. All right, I don't think you have to get that deep into it. Now, here's a long-term consequence. Here's why this is so important. And I think this shocked a lot of people in the scientific world. The long-term consequence is that the universe is ultimately headed to an end result known as heat death, where all the heat energy available to do work, in other words, to move things around, for example, it just all levels out. And literally, it means that the physical universe ends up being a stagnant mess of lifeless matter. All the stars burn out, and there's no light, for example. It's just nothing. It's just a mess. And so this, and people don't argue that I know of. Scientists don't argue against the second law of thermodynamics. But this was kind of a shock, because what did it mean? What did it imply? Scientists who are paying attention to this new insight given by the second law of thermodynamics realize that the universe must have had a beginning. Why is that? Okay, why does the universe have to have a beginning? Okay, if there was no beginning, if the time for the universe stretched infinitely backwards in the time, all the way back to infinity and backwards, then we would not be here, because the universe would have already been in heat death. Okay, wherever there's matter, there's a second law of thermodynamics, which is one of the most reliable principles in all of science. And entropy increases, and we end up in heat death. And well, when would it start? Well, really, it was always here, because the universe would have gone back infinitely far into time. So we really wouldn't have a universe. It would just be lifeless stuff. Okay, we could not have life. We wouldn't be here. So so because we're here, it really means the universe had a beginning. Isn't that clever? Amazing, amazing. And so that I think that was unsettling to some of the scientists who um, were kind of getting convinced that there is no God, and oh, we're in trouble. All right, so unless it could find an exception to the second law, scientific theory confirmed that the universe did not stretch back infinitely in time, that it had to have a beginning, had to be a beginning. All right. But wait, there's more. Okay. In the 1920s, astronomer Edwin Hubble, you've heard of the Hubble telescope, he discovered that the Milky Way is not the only galaxy in the universe. And the estimated number of galaxies is now around 2 trillion. It's a really big number, each with an average of at least 100 billion stars. Multiply that together and you get something rather huge. And that estimate may be low because we can only see what we can see with our telescopes. So it's the universe is enormous. And although stars and galaxies like our sun and our Milky Way are observed to be predominantly composed of hydrogen, Hubble also discovered that most galaxies appear redder than expected. All right, so most of the stars and galaxies, it's mostly hydrogen. Hydrogen is fusing into helium, and helium eventually fuses into, I imagine, lithium, and it goes down the line until the star just kind of either blows up if it's humongously big, or if it's small, it just kind of dies and turns into some other of the early elements in the periodic table. All right, so but why would some of them be red? Actually, most of the far ones away were kind of red, redder than expected, and there were degrees of redness which were telling. And so the explanation for what's called a redshift is that these galaxies are expanding outward from us at very fast speeds due to the Doppler shift. And light waves from an object moving away from us are stretched, changing the color we observe towards red. All right, so a light wave kind of goes up and down like this. And if you stretch it out, it's a slower vibration rate. And slower vibration rate tends to make it redder. Now, there are some galaxies, relatively few, but there's some galaxies that have a blue shift, and they're moving more toward us. And so their waves are being compacted, and the higher frequency of those waves make them more bluish. And so, all right, so that was very interesting. Since galaxies appear fairly equally in quantity in all directions from us, the sky makes it appear that the Earth is close to the center of the universe. I'm kind of taking a slight detour here, but I think it's pretty interesting. So let's have some fun with this. Astronomers have an explanation called isotropy or isotropy. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. I'll call it isotropy and hope for the best. What they call isotropy is for what they regard as an illusion that we're at or near the center of the universe, based on how everything is expanding. Well, I can't blame them because they have a belief that happenstance, life managed to come up on this earth because all the factors that needed for life happened to appear, and life spontaneous came into being on Earth. Okay, and we're just one little planet in some nondescript solar system and star out on the edge of a galaxy, and so to that mainstream scientific world, we're nothing special other than we have the conditions possible for life to evolve. All right, so we can we can say a lot about all that. But they have a principle, and it makes some sense. And they often look at it, if you paint some dots on a balloon, you blow up the balloon, you see everything is moving apart. All right, and so they can kind of wave their hands and say, well, it gives the illusion that we're at the center of the universe because we see kind of an equal number of stars in all directions. All right, so and then observations in the 1960s about something called the cosmic microwave background, if correct, appear to reinforce this isotropy theory. All right, so the cosmic microwave background is the beginning of when the universe, from the Big Bang, after 380,000 years, they estimate that the universe had cooled enough that light was able to form. And so this is actually the beginning light of the universe. It would be at the edge of the visible universe, and it's probably as far back as we're going to be able to observe. And so it kind of reinforces their theory. All right, I think there's some questions about how good that microwave background is. It's there are some people that will challenge it because the sensitivity of the data collected is so tight that could be mistakes in that. Anyway, I don't know enough to weigh in one side or the other. Anyway, isotropy means that we would appear to be at the center of the universe no matter where we are. All right, so it looks like we're at the center of the universe no matter where we are. Now, and although it makes some sense due to how the universe is expanding, how it works close to the edge of the universe really escapes me. All right, if we're near the edge of the universe, on one side, we're not going to see as many stars as we'll see on the other side. And anyway, it's somehow, I may not be smart enough to understand that. Okay, so I'll just throw that out there. What was that? Oops. Okay. I think I had a duplicate slide there. From a Christian perspective, perhaps God did put us at the center of the universe. Maybe he did, you know, because we look at this. The earth was already formed. This is from a Christian perspective. Go back to Genesis chapter 1. The earth was already formed, and the plant kingdom had been established by the third day. On the fourth day, in Genesis 1, verse 14, we find the greatest understatement of all time. Ah, he also made the stars. I just, when I leave that, I just see that I just laugh. Oh, he also made the stars. Oh, boy. Well, we're going to talk about all that when I do a deep dive into the book of Genesis, particularly the early part of Genesis. We're going to look at all that. Even what do you do on the first day? Let there be light. You know how complicated light is? What has to go into the universe in order for there to be light? Oh, wow. It's staggering. So very interesting stuff. All right, well, let's move on. Now, Hubble was able to estimate the rate of expansion of the universe, and it's called the Hubble constant. Now they have some problems with the Hubble constant because there's two nice ways to measure it, and the two nice ways they can measure it don't line up. Okay, it's like one way it's here the Hubble constant's in this range of values, and the other way the Hubble constant is in this range of values, and they don't overlap. And so they're still trying to figure that one out. And I kind of sympathize for them. This is the march of science, and they will run into problems. Anyway, this led to important observations by a Belgian priest and a world-class astronomer, Georges Lemaitre. Lemaitre. Anyway, so in 1931, Father Lemaitre verified that physics supported the idea that the universe could have contracted as small as a point in space in the far distant past. And so you can see where that's leading to. It's leading to the Big Bang. So run the clock forward in time from that singular or nearly singular point. Maybe it contracted the size of a golf ball. We don't know. And we get the Big Bang theory, for which most people in the world are convinced is a fact. And I would say probably, it's a wild guess, about half of Christians believe in the Big Bang is how the universe started, how God started the universe. And all right. Could be, until I start looking at all the science. All right. Now, the math can be adjusted to fit the theory that appears to describe the beginning and the evolution of our universe into stars and galaxies as we see them. Oh boy, that's a big red flag for me. I love math. It's been my life. I'm a mathematician, but I also know that you can sometimes fit mathematics to fit evidence, and it doesn't make the evidence true. All right, so that's people sometimes in the sciences overuse math. It's a wonderful subject, but sometimes I think it gets overused. All right, I'll go on that rant another day. So, except that these models do not fit so well as we build more and more powerful telescopes. Okay, so I'm going to have to do a video series, and it'll be a good one, on what's the evidence that our universe is actually a lot younger than, well, how old do they think it is? All right, according to what they're saying, the Big Bang Theory predicts the age of the universe as around 13.8 billion years. Boy, that's a long time ago. And that it has a diameter of 46.5 billion light years. Some of you might think, well, how's that possible? Because nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. How could it be this big when it's only that old? Okay. How can you get 46.5 billion miles away in only 13.8 billion years? Okay. Well, it's what allows it, our science as we've developed it does allow space-time. Our physical world has the three spatial dimensions, length, width, and height, and also has time dimension. They call that space-time. And so it's permissible to expand faster than the speed of light under these series. And I don't really disagree with that at all. It may be true. And anyway, that's how you get such a big number. In case you were wondering. Okay. All right. There's plenty of evidence to support the biblical claim of our universe being only about 6,000 years old. And I realize that this looks utterly crazy to the majority of people in this world. They think, what? 6,000 years old? No way. That's just like almost yesterday, you know? Yeah, it is. We shall have a look at all this in detail in a different video series. You'd be amazed how much science points to, actually does a better job pointing to 6,000 years than it does to 13.8 billion years. Okay. And I know right now, you know, if you stumbled into this, you're a big skeptic of all this, you just think I'm full of it. You're going to scoff at this and say, oh, you're nuts. You're a nut job to believe all that. Some kind of nutty fundamentalist. All right, well, I hope you watch those videos when I get them out. Okay, it's pretty eye-opening, and that's part of what I find this whole biblical validity stuff very exciting, because you can get into these details and say, "Wow, yeah, Bible is really true, isn't it?" Yeah, good evidence for that. All right, let's see what's next here. The principal mistake, I believe, is that scientists working on explaining the origin of the universe are not looking more closely towards home, at evidence from our own solar system and our planet Earth, which indicate that we are far younger than presumed. Oh yeah, oh yeah, boy, I can't wait to get into that. That's going to be fun. And by the way, a lot of videos out there, um, and many of them done by experts in their fields. You know, scientific experts in their fields who are called creation scientists. They do believe in the creation version of the Old Testament of Genesis, and so you can get really great detail by experts in those fields out there if you look around. And I'm just kind of bringing this together into an overview into this channel here, and because I have no credentialed expertise in the sciences, only in mathematics. So, but science was always a big love of mine, and it's been fun looking at all this for me. I know. All right, well, let's see. Returning to this main issue, the Big Bang Theory begs the question, where did all that matter and energy come from? Where did it come from? Okay, because the first law of thermodynamics, and people don't seem to argue about this either, it maintains that the sum of energy and matter remains constant. Matter and energy is neither created nor destroyed. All right, so you know, I think that matter and energy have an equivalence through Einstein's E equals mc squared. Energy equals to mass times the square of the velocity of light, and so we have energy can be and matter can be put in the same equation. Okay, that means there's sort of an equivalence. Well, that insight led to the development of the atomic weapons, and also helped us figure out how the sun was shining. Do you know we didn't know how the sun shined until 1938? I think scientists were kind of like, you know, probably some had theories, but we were kind of clueless until 1938. And then Hans Bethe was the great scientist who figured all that out. Anyway, that's another story. All right, so basically, all the matter and energy in the universe cannot be created. It can't be destroyed. It's the same. So, in other words, where do all this energy come from for the Big Bang? So here we have it. The current Big Bang theory states that all matter and energy were compacted into a very tiny space and began expanding at rates exceeding the speed of light. Matter cannot move faster than the speed of light, but Einstein's relativity does permit space to expand this fast. All right, I think I kind of covered that earlier. I forgot I had a slide on this. So we're left with two main possibilities from a scientific naturalistic worldview. One is that time, space, and matter appeared out of nowhere by an as yet unexplainable natural process in violation of the first law of thermodynamics. So I'm using their science, which is good science. First and second laws of thermodynamics are seem like they're always confirmed in all experiments. So well, this implies that there are two possibilities. Um, there was no natural process that would not have violated the first law of thermodynamics. Just all that stuff appeared out of nowhere. And here's the other one. Our universe is part of a multiverse, multiple, if not infinitely many universes constantly being created. Okay, that multiverse thing, multiverse theories, here I am, my opinion, seem to be a fairly recent fad. There's some great physicists, scientists out there who have very creative theories, and I don't criticize them for those theories, except the problem is they're not going to, as far as we know, we can't verify them. They're just theories. And they're trying to explain away how we could have a Big Bang without having a supernatural world or God, basically. How can we have a Big Bang without a creator God? So no one has yet devised any way to test these theories, these multiverse theories. And they still seem to require that matter comes from nothingness, or that the universe still had no beginning. So they still have a problem. One of the neat one I saw the other day was the theory that, well, there are just infinitely many Big Bangs going on, and we're just one of all those Big Bangs. And by sheer coincidence, we had the all the laws of nature that would permit life to happen, and somewhere else in the universe, because there are infinitely many universes, we must exist somewhere else also on infinitely many universes. All right, it gets kind of crazy, I think. They're not going to be able to prove this, okay, because you can't see that far. All right, so both the second law of thermodynamics and the Big Bang theory imply that the universe had a beginning. So unless science can somehow explain, and by the way, I'm not saying the Big Bang theory is, I think, is totally correct at all. Actually, I don't, because God created the stars and all that on the fourth day of creation. But if we give them the second law of thermodynamics and the Big Bang theory, let's give them that premise. This implies that the universe had a beginning. Unless science can somehow explain that nothingness created everything, there really remains one highly likely conclusion. The universe had a creator outside the natural universe. How about that? This creator had to be supernatural, so there must be a supernatural aspect to our universe. And so that's my first leg of this. How can there be God? There can only be God if God is supernatural. All right, so here's my evidence for it. The whatever supernatural power or mechanism created all this mess would have needed to create time, space, and matter at the beginning of the physical universe. All right. So look at this. This is, I'm getting to a punchline here, which is really outstanding. An ancient Israelite named Moses, a man who was not a scientist, but who claimed to hear the voice of God, wrote the following in the 15th century BC. And by the way, no one in the world knew hardly anything about physics back then. But Moses wrote this. This is, Moses wrote, is believed by most to have written the first 5 books of the Bible. In the beginning, time. Time is created. God, who is a supernatural being, created the heaven. Some biblical translations call it heavens. Heaven singular is from the original King James version. I like to use it, but it really doesn't matter. It means the same thing. Heaven or heavens implies space, and the earth, which is matter. So in the beginning, God created time. He had to be supernatural because nothing else was here. He also created space, and he created matter. Look at that. Time, space, and matter. And from matter, you can get energy because matter and energy have an equivalence through Einstein's E equals mc squared. Wow. That just blows me away. All right. And okay. So to wrap this up, scientific naturalists, if their worldview is hardened, are unlikely to be impressed with our conclusion that scientific evidence and principles strongly indicate the necessity of a supernatural existence. To be fair, they continue to work on their theories. They are working on their theories. Well, how is that evidence stacking up? Okay, how is that stacking up? So I like this guy, William of Ockham. He lived in the mainly the 1300s, an English theologian and philosopher and writer and all that stuff, friar, I think. He reasoned that the simplest explanation with the fewest assumptions is usually the correct one. All right, this principle is famously known as Occam's razor. All right, now Occam's razor, you hear that once in a while. It doesn't give us a license to conclude that there is a supernatural realm, just based upon his principle. But it does strengthen the argument, since the simplest conclusion from evidence is that the universe cannot be here unless there is a supernatural existence which somehow caused it. All right, so there's that. All right, so in part 3, we will look at statistical data that from neurology or neuroscience, brain science, and also near-death studies, which supports the case for the supernatural. And there have been a lot of studies on this. Um, and this will be interesting. We also touch on studies about UFOs and alien abductions of all things. Okay, it gets better. The whole subject of alien abductions points toward Jesus. All right, so you're just gonna have to hang on for this. It's so good. It's so good. And I may do a UFO video fairly soon and touch base on all this because I think those UFOs out there. I don't disagree. People see UFOs. Yeah, they're real in a sense, but the it seems to be no scientific explanation, a reasonable explanation that alien civilizations could get here from light years away and do the things they do in the sky and come and go, and that's just the stuff of science fiction. Anyway, let's save that for later. Okay, that'll be fun. All right, so that concludes things here for this video, and I'll have links below. I'm creating a website. I'll probably have that linked below also, which I try to organize these videos I'm doing, so you can go through and pick out what you're most interested in. All right, well, thanks, and here's my roll credits.